السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله الذي جعل للعلم أصولا وسهل بها إليه وصولا، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. All praise and thanks is due to Allah, the one who made for knowledge foundations, and through them facilitated its attainment and preservation. And I bear witness that none has the right to be worshipped except for Allah alone, having no partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad is his servant and messenger. May the salawat and salam of Allah be upon him. This is the fourth sitting in our reading of Khulasa Ta'zim al-Ilm. And these are tools, 20 tools that the author put together in this one book, through which the student may give knowledge of revelation and knowledge of the Sharia its due right and due respect. And the importance of that, as we mentioned in the first couple of tools, is that if a person does that, then the level of knowledge that he or she will attain will be greater. In proportion to his respect or her respect of knowledge will be their attainment of that Islamic knowledge. So today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we're going to read from tool number 16 until tool number 20, thereby, insha'Allah ta'ala, finishing our reading of the book. So the author, may Allah grant him success, said the 16th tool, al-Ma'aqid al-Sadis Ashar, and he entitled this توقير مجالس العلم وإجلال أوعيته, having reverence for the gatherings of knowledge, the sittings of knowledge, the circles of knowledge, and having honoring the containers of the utensils of knowledge, primarily that being books, and in our times you see other things as well alongside those things. So this tool that a student takes then is that he should have, or she should have, the right attitude and the right respect for the circles of knowledge, the places where a person learns, and also the containers of knowledge, such as the books. And this Shaykh's speech can be summarized into three main points. The Shaykh's speech can be summarized into three main points. Number one, he explains to us why we should have this much respect for the circles of knowledge. So the first summary point is the high status of the learnings, the gatherings of learning. The high status of the gatherings of learning. Number two, respecting the gatherings of learning. Respecting, how to show respect in the gatherings of learning. And number three, respecting the tools of learning. So number one, the high status of the circles or the sittings of knowledge. Number two, respecting those gatherings, the circles of knowledge, how to respect. What does that mean? How does that manifest? And number three, respecting the tools of knowledge. So the author began, and that first summary points why, or showing the high status of the circles of knowledge, is summarized in that first line where he says, فَمَجَالِسُ الْعُلَمَاء كمجالس الأنبياء, because the circles of the scholars are like, have a similitude to the circles of the prophets and messengers. And he goes on to clarify. He says, Sahal ibn Abdullah said, whoever wants to have a look at the gatherings of the prophets should look at the gatherings of the scholars. A man comes and says, oh, so and so, what do you say about a man who took an oath on his wife if she did such and such thing? So the scholar or the person replies, he divorced her, he divorced his wife. And another man comes and says, what do you say about a man who took an oath on his wife in such thing? Then he says, the statement does not break the marriage. And this does not occur except for a prophet or a scholar. And so acknowledge this well. I.e., what he's saying is that this authority, number one, is revelation. That's how a prophet gets it. And number two, the only other people that can speak with such authority are those who know that revelation. So in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the people would come and ask this question, and the Prophet ﷺ would answer these questions. And when the Prophet ﷺ had passed, then it was left for those who learned the Prophet ﷺ's knowledge, what he has left of knowledge. They took that position of answering such questions and clarifying what the revelation took. So this is why, or this is one of the reasons that the gatherings of knowledge are so important, and why we should honor them, because they are like the gatherings of the prophets or messengers. Secondly, then he goes on to say, okay, so how do you have this respect? What does it mean to have this respect? How does that manifest upon a person? So he gives some examples. So it is upon the student of knowledge to know the rights of the gatherings of knowledge. So he sits there with proper etiquette and listens to the teacher while looking at him. I.e., the student listens to the teacher while he is looking at the teacher, and does not turn from him without a necessity, and does not get disturbed by any noise he hears, and does not play with his hands or legs, i.e., does not fidget, and does not lean against the wall in the presence of his teacher, nor does he lean against his hand, i.e., lean on his hand, nor does he cough or move constantly, nor does he speak to his neighbor, and when he sneezes, when the student sneezes, he lowers his voice, and when he yawns, he covers his face after having tried to repel it as much as possible. But these are some of the etiquettes that a person should have. And etiquettes in knowledge, or etiquettes in general, are either established through the Islamic revelation, the Sharia, or they're established through the common practices and customs of that place. So there are some things in one country which may be rude, which may not be rude in another country. So when you're in that country, then you would not do that specific practice. It's not because it's Islamically wrong, but because it is considered bad manners in that particular area. So that would also fall under those manners, along with the Sharia or the Islamic, what is Islamically considered as good and bad manners. Also, what the Sheikh mentions here in some of the explanations is that when a teacher speaks to the students, he or she is not speaking to a group of people such that you can turn away. For example, if you're speaking to a group of your friends, if one of them turns away, then there are other people listening. It's not that big of a deal. But you should not consider a class in that manner. The class should be that you're assuming, or you're looking at, or you're feeling that the teacher, he or she, is directly speaking to you. As such, if someone was directly speaking to you in a one-on-one conversation, then you would not turn away. You will not say, oh, there's other people here, I can turn away, if you feel that they are addressing you. So in the class, we should have the feeling that the teacher is directly addressing me. He's addressing a group of us, but each one individually. As such, you should do those things that are appropriate for when someone is addressing you individually. So you shouldn't also think, oh, because I'm not at home or I'm in a masjid, I don't have to sit properly. But if you are home with the same person, you'll sit properly, you would pay attention to what he or she is saying and so forth. So part of the etiquette of learning is that you pay attention to the teacher, and you will see much benefit from this, because this is one of the ways that you will see you learning from the teacher's manners. Because if you're constantly paying attention to the teacher, you will see how he looks at people. You will see how he or she deals with questions, how he or she deals with disturbances that occur in the class. Whereas if your mind is wandering, you're not paying attention to the teacher, you may get some benefits that he or she says, but you may miss a lot of the manners and etiquettes that the teacher has. And then thirdly, the author in this 16th point of having respect and reverence for the gatherings of knowledge and honoring the containers of knowledge, he mentions, and it is included in the reverence of knowledge to honor its container in which it is preserved. And it is generally the book. So it is appropriate for a student of knowledge to safeguard the book, preserve it and honor it, take it in its care, and he should not make it like a box wherein things are filled. And he does not make it like a purse where he wants to place it, he keeps it with care. Ishaq ibn Rahawayh once threw a book which was in his hand. So Imam Ahmed, when he saw him, he became upset. And he said, "Is this how you deal with the speech of the noble people, of the righteous?" And do not lean against, and Sheikh goes on to explain, do not lean against the book. Don't place it at his feet. The person shouldn't place the book at his feet. When he reads it to the teacher, he raises it from the ground and he holds it with his hand. I have good manners with your books. And especially since the books contain the ayat and hadith. So the person should have even extra care for those aspects of knowledge. And from the things that should be noted here is that many times you may see someone who is not a technical student of knowledge. He or she may not technically be a student of knowledge in the technical sense of the term. But especially if they are older, you will see that they sometimes will sit in a lesson and listen carefully and pay attention and become affected by the speech that is in the lesson more than some of the students. So it's important then for the student, especially the young student, the beginner student, to benefit from such people, especially if they're in your family. There are many times where people who may not be considered students of knowledge have mentioned things that has made students of knowledge think, you know what, that's an accurate point. Such as where it happened to me, for example, where someone mentioned to me something about the way the books were set up in the house. And it's something perhaps you may not have noticed before, but there are some things that other people may notice. That although they may not be students of knowledge, they have this kind of, you can say, jealousy or this passion for wanting to respect the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so they will have a kind of natural disposition to wanting to show respect to these ayat or these ahadith or these books that the student uses. Okay, point number 17, tool number 17. The Sheikh mentions الذب عن العلم والذود عن حياضه. Defending the knowledge, and those who carry it. And this can be summarized into two parts. This tool can be summarized into two parts. Number one, defending the sacredness of knowledge. An introduction to this point. So the first summary is that the Sheikh introduces this point. And number two, the Sheikh then goes on to mention some of the avenues that this defense may come in. some of the ways that this defense of knowledge may occur. So number one, introduction, okay, defending the sacredness of knowledge. And then number two, the Sheikh mentions some of the different ways that this defending of knowledge may occur. So he says, indeed, knowledge has much sacredness, making it obligatory to defend its honor if it is attacked with what is not appropriate. And this defense becomes apparent among the scholars' allocation from it is refuting the opposition. So whoever clearly opposes the Sharia has to be refuted, whoever it may be, for the sake of upholding the religion and supporting the Muslims. I.e., knowledge has a certain sacredness to it. If a person goes against knowledge, then that has to be corrected, regardless of who that person is. And that is in order to protect any misunderstanding with regards to the faith, and as a nasiha, as a sincere advice towards the Muslims, so that the general person does not become confused by these mistakes that have occurred. In our times, perhaps this word refutation has negative connotations, but if done correctly, refutations are very beneficial and are a must, because if you don't clarify mistakes that have occurred, then the religion slowly would change. People's understandings of the religion would slowly change. So refuting that which opposes the religion is a must. The manner in which it is done is what is important, is where perhaps some people may disagree. The manner, and we've spoken about this at length in Hilya Talib al-Ilm, that the manner of clarifying mistakes should not lead to a greater evil than the mistake itself, for example. The manner of clarifying the mistake should not lead to a greater problem than the mistake itself. So the Sheikh now goes on to explain, okay, how does this defending of knowledge occur? What are the different ways that this may occur? He says, from it, boycotting the innovators. And it is a consensus mentioned by Abu Ya'la al-Farra. So knowledge is not to be taken from the people of innovation, but it is not an issue if it is done out of necessity, like how the hadith scholars would narrate them. So in principle, knowledge is not to be taken from a person of innovation. But there are, of course, exceptions in cases of necessity. And we mentioned, as mentioned, Hadith al-Ilm, like, for example, in our case, because we don't narrate hadith as such, but in our case, for example, if someone is studying at a university where there is a set curriculum, a set teacher set in place for that curriculum, and he cannot pass the year unless he goes to that class, even though the teacher may be teaching something which, or the teacher may be a person of innovation, then he is forced in that case to finish that. And to clarify here now, innovation has different levels, different types. And the people of innovations are of different levels. There are people who call to innovation, people who don't call to innovation, and so forth. So the issue of boycotting the innovator, it depends on the situation at hand. But in terms of knowledge, we're talking about now in terms of knowledge. We're not talking about in day-to-day life. We're talking about in terms of learning from a person who changed or is changing the religion. Innovation means that he or she has added something, or whether it's action or belief. And in reality, the reality of the matter is that the religion is then being changed. In that case, then it does not make sense to learn from such a person. But as the Sheikh mentioned, there are exceptions. Number two, and from it, i.e. from the ways, the Sheikh goes on now, from the ways of defending knowledge is rebuking the student, the teacher rebuking the student if he crosses the boundaries in his arguments or happens to dispute violently or show disrespect. And if the teacher must remove the students from his gatherings as a rebuke, then let him do so, just as Shu'bah used to do to Affan ibn Muslim in his lesson. And from the ways that a teacher may rebuke the student is that the teacher, the Shaykh goes on to say, and the student could be rebuked by not turning towards him, not answering him. So silence becomes the answer, as stated by Al-A'mash. And the Shaykh goes on, and we saw this a lot from a group of teachers, among them Al-Allama ibn Baz. So at times the questioner would ask him a question that would not benefit him, would not benefit the questioner. So the Shaykh will not answer him and ask the reader, i.e. the person who's reading in the lesson, to carry on with his reading, or answer him different from his expectation. The person comes with a question and the teacher may answer the question. He may answer what the student should be asking, not what the student is asking. And here, that's the end of the Sheikh's speech with regards to this defending knowledge. And here also, some of the statements of the early generations is that the student now, if he is faced with a teacher who does that, he should be or she should be patient. He shouldn't think, oh, khalas, I'm not going to come to class anymore. The teacher doesn't treat me well, or he shouted at me, or something along those lines. No, knowledge, you are the one, and I am the one that need the knowledge. As such, we sometimes have to bear a certain level of bitterness. It doesn't mean that the teacher is right, but it means that you have to be sometimes diplomatic. You have to sometimes be weigh out the benefits and harms. Of course, if the teacher is abusing you, that's different. But if the teacher sometimes is harsh, sometimes he hasn't got patience, then you give excuses to the teacher. Because in the end, we as students will be the ones that lose out more. That's not a green card for teachers to just do that, but it's just the reality of the situation. We don't live in a perfect world where everything is exactly the way you want it. So anyway, the point the Sheikh was making was that knowledge has a sacredness and needs to be preserved and defended. And then he gave us some example of how that may occur. Okay, number 18, the 18th tool, the Sheikh mentions التحفظ في مسألة العالم, being cautious or being wary with regards to asking the scholar. And that will become clear as we go into the tool. What it means is when you ask the scholar, there should be some etiquettes that we have so that we preserve the right of knowledge in terms of the way we ask questions. The Sheikh speech can be summarized in two ways, or into 2 points. Number one, the need for caution in asking questions. The major need for caution in asking questions. Caution, i.e. to think, to ponder, to be careful when you ask questions, when we ask questions. And number two, 4 steps which will help the person attain this caution. 4 steps which will help the person attain this caution. So number one was the need for caution in asking questions. And number two was 4 steps in attaining this caution. The Shaykh, may Allah grant him success, begins by fleeing from the chaotic issues and thereby protecting the dignity of a scholar. For indeed, some questions are intended for riots, stirring up trials, and to spread evil. And the one who diverts to the scholar such issues will face what he would not like, as has passed in the issues of rebuking the students, i.e., the person who asks questions with these intentions, then he will end up finding a teacher who will rebuke him the way we just mentioned previously. So it is a must to be cautious while asking the scholar, and none would succeed in being cautious except he who implements four principles. Okay, so that's point number two. So point number one is the importance for being cautious. Sometimes the questions that we ask may have huge implications in the akhirah, in someone's akhirah, and also in someone's dunya, especially now that you can ask questions from all over the world to people all over the world. So a person, when asking a question, needs to be careful. He needs to respect knowledge by asking a question which will be which will have fidelity to the situation, a question which will be realistic and fit the situation at hand, not fit the person's desires. Because if a person asks a teacher a question or a sheikh a question in a way which is not the way of the reality, but asks it in a way to lean the teacher to a certain answer, then that teacher is going to be free from that mistake as long as he or she done the best that they could in ascertaining what the situation is. And the person will have earned evil. So four steps then the Sheikh mentions for us to think about before we ask a question. And also, before we go into asking a question, the four steps. A person, when asking a question, we should all have a pure heart in wanting the real answer. If we already want an answer and we're just trying to find that answer by any means possible, then Allah knows. As one of the scholars mentioned at the start of his poem, Shaykh al-Sa'di, فيا سائلا عن منهج الحق يبتغي سبيل طرق فيا سائلا عن منهج الحق يبتغي سلوك طريق القوم حقا ويسعد تأمل هداك الله ما قد نظمته تأمل من قد كان للحق يقصد. O you who ask with regards to the path or the manhaj and you want to transverse it, roughly that's what the first line means. Second line he goes, تأمل, ponder, هداك الله, may Allah guide you, ما قد نظمته, that which I have composed, that which I have composed in this poem. تأمل من قد كان للحق يقصد. He said to you, ponder it. Then he said, but the pondering that you're going to do, let it be a pondering of تأمل من, the pondering of who, of the person who للحق, for the truth, يقصد, is aiming for. I.e., if you're asking me a question about the people and the right path, the right way to transversing this life, then I have put this poem for you. But only ponder, he says, ponder over this poem that I have put for you. But make sure that the way you ponder, the way you're thinking, when I'm going to mention these things, the way you ponder over them, the way you think about what I'm saying to you, is the pondering and the thinking of the person who wants to get to the truth. If we as Muslims, and especially those brothers and sisters who are students, ask questions with this in mind, this is a great first step to make sure that we're asking not to arrive at what we preconceively thought that the answer is. I think it is. Answer is X. Let me find the Sheikh who will answer X. But rather we ask the Sheikh because we want to know what is Allah's ruling on this matter. What will please Allah, regardless of what will please me, because my sight, the reasons why I may like something are short-sightedness. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. He knows what is best. So this is an important thing when we ask questions. Okay, what are the four steps? The Shaykh Hafidahullah says, firstly, think about the questions and think about the question and why are you asking? First, think about the question and why are you asking? Let me see if I can type at the same time as I'm talking. So the objective in asking should be to understand and learn, not to bring about difficulty or show one's dominance. For indeed, the ones whose objective is evil in questioning will be prohibited from the blessing of knowledge and will be denied its benefit. I.e., if a person asks just to show off, to embarrass the teacher, or something along those lines, then realize that knowledge will be prevented for you in the long term. Number two, pay attention to what you ask. Number two, pay attention to what you ask. So do not ask, the Sheikh goes on to say, so do not ask what is no benefit, either by looking at your situation or by looking at the question itself. One way to discern that, for the person to discern whether the thing is of benefit or not, is to think to himself or herself, what difference will the question make to me in my practical life, in my day-to-day life? Sometimes people ask a question and the answer is, okay, if it's yes, then what's the difference? If it's no, then what's the difference? And sometimes we realize that there's no actual difference. But perhaps we just think of a question that comes to mind. It's not necessarily when a teacher says these things to you or makes you kind of throws you back by asking another question to you, it's not that the teacher's trying to embarrass you. Well, Allahu Alam, depends on your teacher. But if I ever do that, it's not that I'm trying to make you feel like your question is silly, but it's a way of training. You know, it happened to me many times, and it still happens to me. Sometimes I may ask a question, and my teacher will say, "Well, why are you asking that? What difference? What would happen if you this? Or what would happen if the answer is this? What would happen if the answer is that?" It's a way of training us to not just quickly just ask anything that comes to mind, but actually ponder before we ask. What are the ramifications of what you're asking? What would be different in your life? Is there going to be a different? Point number three. Oh, sorry. The Sheikh goes on to say, and like that is to ask about what has not occurred or what cannot be told to everyone, as it is specific for a group of people. And what does not occur here means what does not occur and is not likely to occur. If something hasn't occurred but is likely to occur, then there's no problem in asking. But something that has no chance of happening anytime soon, but you just throw in wild questions out, then generally speaking, you shouldn't just do that for no reason. Number three, the Sheikh goes on to say, beware of the circumstances of the condition of the Sheikh to be able to answer his question. So do not ask him in a condition preventing him to answer, like him being worried or in deep thought or walking away or riding in a car. Rather wait for the right time. So be aware of the Sheikh's situation. And the fourth one, he says, carefulness of the questioner on how to ask his or her question by framing it beautifully and respectfully. So proceed with a prayer for the Sheikh, dignify him in the speech, and one should not speak to him like someone from the market or a lay person. So how can we shorten that? Someone can shorten that in the chat. So here is okay. Now you've got all these 3 points there. The fourth point is, how do you format the question? Make sure that you format the question in an appropriate way. Like we've been in a class and someone asked the Sheikh something, and then they said to him, but Sheikh Saleh Fawzan says this in front of the whole class, in front of everyone. And this is not, generally speaking, appropriate to say that so and so or this other Sheikh says something opposing to what you said. This is not from the manners of the student, generally speaking. There may be some exceptions, but it's not from the manner of the students that when a teacher gives him an answer, he goes and says, but teacher so and so said. Likewise, notice that part of the questions is to respect the teacher. From the respecting of the teacher, or the questioner, or the Sheikh that you're asking the question to, is, for example, like we said in Hilya, أحسن الله إليكم, may Allah be good to you, may Allah treat you well, making dua for the teacher, and then presenting the question. And there's a beautiful statement which is from At-Tibyan an-Nawawi's book, rahimahullah, and I think it's important here because the Sheikh, he says here, respectfully, and not to speak to the Sheikh like he's someone from the market. Respecting the scholars, and here Nawawi rahimahullah mentions with regards to the people of the Quran, it is a respect that must be given to them, but it's not a respect that they must seek for themselves. So there's two sides. From the sides of us as lay Muslims, and some of us perhaps maybe students of knowledge that are listening, then from our side we have to give that respect. Whether we always agree with the Shaykh, you never always agree with somebody, but because of the station that he has as a teacher, as a Shaykh, and from the aspect of the Shaykh himself, he is not supposed to demand that respect. Like, no, you must call me alim, or you must call me allama, or you must call me Shaykh, or you must call me. No, the Shaykh. So from the Shaykh's aspect, or even from the person who's memorized the Quran aspect, you shouldn't be like, oh, I'm a person who's memorized the Quran, show me respect. No. But from this aspect of the other people, then we should respect them for what they have, for what Allah has given to them in terms of knowledge. Then they have a station that Allah has favored them in terms of that knowledge. As for the insides, then Allah knows best. But we should show them the respect for the knowledge that they carry. But sometimes you may see a teacher say, no, you should call me Sheikh. Now, if you see that from your teacher, then, unless you have reasons to think otherwise, then most likely the teacher is training you. Most likely the teacher is training you to get used to having that respect for a person of knowledge. Not because he wants it himself or herself, but because he wants you to get that respect. For example, there was one brother, may Allah reward him and rectify his situation. I asked him, what's one of the most amazing things that you got from a certain scholar when you were studying? And he said, I wrote an essay at Medina. He was studying in Medina, and this was a while before there was computers. It's typewriters. I think it was typewriters, or maybe there were computers, but it was not like our time. It was when essays had to be handwritten or something, or typed. And he handed it in, and the Sheikh said to him, what's this? And the brother said, okay, this is the essay, something along those lines. And then the Sheikh said, go back and write it, and go back and write it again, and in front of the Imam's name, write Imam, like Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmed, like this. So these are not just names that you can throw around like that, saying Ahmed said this or Abu Hanifa said that. He said, go back and write it again. And it's not like our times where you go back on Word and you just type it again. You'd have to type the whole thing out again. It's not just something you can scroll because it's a typewriter. What's the point of that? It doesn't mean that the Sheikh saying you can never mention them like that, but it's trying to build, in especially the beginner student, a sense of respect for those that came before us, for those people of knowledge, especially that spend their lives, that Allah blessed them with that type of life, that they spent that life in knowledge. So when we come now in the 14th century or 15th century or whatever the case, then we should be people that, whether we like it or not, Allah has made it that people have preceded us. And so we have to show those people that preceded us respect. And that also is with regards to people that are not people of knowledge, people that have certain status within the community. People that have certain statuses are treated to a certain level. It doesn't mean that they can abuse their power, but that's how it is. There's a certain level of respect that you're supposed to give to people. So this was with regards to asking questions. The Sheikh gave us the importance of being careful when asking a question, because some questions can cause riots, can destroy areas, especially to do with the religion. And then he gave us 4 steps, 4 principles for us to be able to evaluate whether our questions are accurate or not. No one has typed the fourth point. The 4th point was with regards to the teachers. So if someone can type that, that would be good, because then I know that you're listening. Khair. Number 19, the 19th tool, the Sheikh mentions شغف القلب بالعلم وغلبته عليه. Allahu Akbar. The heart being having a passion for knowledge, and knowledge being taking over the heart. Knowledge taking over the heart, having dominance, as one person wrote, as one brother translated as, over the heart. And what I'll do, I'll read the 19th and 20th tool. I'll just read them and you can try summarize it yourself, okay? See how that works. And then when we do the summary in a couple of minutes, then Jazakallah khair. Wa alaikum salam. So the Sheikh says, so honest search for it, i.e. for knowledge, necessitates a love of it and an attachment of the heart for it. And the slave will not gain the heights of knowledge until it becomes the greatest pleasure. So an honest search for knowledge, and you want to attain an attachment of the hearts to it, because the slave will not reach heights in knowledge, will not reach a high level of knowledge until knowledge becomes his greatest pleasure. That was my first summary point. Second summary point that I had, and I won't tell you the rest. And the sweetness of knowledge is gained by three matters. وإنما تنال لذة العلم بثلاثة أمور ذكرها أبو عبد الله بن القيم. And knowledge is gained, the sweetness of knowledge is tasted or is gained by three matters, which were mentioned by Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy upon him. First, exerting effort and struggle. Exerting effort and struggle. Number two, صدق الطلب. Honestly seeking it, truthfully being honest and truthful in your seeking of it. And number three, having the correct intention and being sincere. Having the correct intention and the right sincerity. And these three matters cannot be perfected except by repelling everything that busies the heart, that makes the heart busy. Sheikh goes on to say, for verily the pleasure of knowledge is greater than the pleasure of gaining rule or authority, for which many souls desire, and for which wealth is spent in abundance, and much blood is shed. And therefore the kings would crave for the sweetness of knowledge, and would feel its absence, and would try to gain it. It was told to Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, a famous Abbasid Khalifa, whose kingdom was spread out in the east and the west, is there anything left from the pleasures of the world that you have not attained? So he said, while he was in his chair on a royal bed, one thing is left, that I should sit in a high pedestal, and around me are the students of hadith, i.e. the seekers of knowledge. And the reader asks, who do you mention? May Allah have mercy upon you. Meaning, he says, Haddathana, so and so narrated to us, that so and so narrated us, and mentions the complete chain. And then he goes on to say, and when the heart is filled with the pleasure of knowledge, the pleasure of other things will fall off, and the soul will forget it. In fact, the pain will transform into pleasure due to its pleasure. In fact, the pain, Allah alam what the Shaykh exactly means, but we'll understand is the pain of knowledge, the tiredness sometimes, the missing things that your friends may be going to, I don't know, going to halal entertainment somewhere, and you're not going because you're going to sit in class, maybe football, Sunday night football, pre-quarantine days, huh? You're missing that. But once you taste this, when you taste this sweetness of knowledge, you don't care about the football. You don't care about the other things. You maybe feel hungry when you go to lesson, and you want to go eat. But once you start your lesson and you're in there and you hear the ayat and the hadith, you have a sweetness for that knowledge that nothing can compete with it. And there are many narrations of those that came before us. They said, had the rulers known of the happiness and the contentment that we have in our hearts, even though the people saying this were people who had hard bread and they used to dip it in the river water to make it soft so they could eat it. And they used to travel journey to seek hadith. They said, had the scholars or had the rulers known what was in our heart from this pleasure, then they would have fought us for it. I remember Sheikh Abdul Razak al-Somali, those of you that know him, may Allah preserve him. He still is unwell, but before he used to do it that he used to teach 3, 4, 5 lessons or 3 or 4 lessons a day, and once in the first week of the month he used to take the whole week off to take his medication properly and to rest because he was ill. He had a continuous illness, and he told me one time. He said, because he used to, in the class, he used to take his medication. He used to eat in the class and say, I'm eating because I don't have time to eat. Otherwise, if I stop the class, then we're not going to have a class. And he used to eat and take his medication in the class. And then he used to say, I have a pain. Because sometimes he would take his hat off and kind of tap his head. And he said, I have a pain. And this pain doesn't go, only goes when I'm in the class. It's not because the pain is gone, but when you taste the sweetness of learning and teaching Islamic knowledge, then that sweetness makes you forget these other things. For that moment, you're in the class and the angels are surrounding you, and you have that knowledge. Then that sweetness will prevail over the other things that perhaps other people may see and say, "How is this person coping?" But of course, there's ups and downs in knowledge, just like there are in life. But that was the 19th tool. The fact that a person has to put his effort in that seeking knowledge. And once you do, you will taste that sweetness. Put all that effort in, have sincere intention, purify your ikhlas, and bi'idhnillah, you will see that this sweetness of knowledge that will flourish from. And then the last tool that the author mentioned, and for this tool as well, we're not going to have a summary, is the 20th tool. حفظ الوقت في العلم, preserving time with regards to knowledge. And he starts off with the statement of Ibn al-Jawzi, wherein he says, Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah said, it is imperative for the man to know the value of his time and the importance of time itself. So do not waste any portion of it except for coming closer to Allah, and prioritize the more important over the less important thing from speech and action. Just repeat that. Prioritize the more important thing from the less important thing from speech and action. Then he went on to say, and from here becomes understood the care of the scholars for knowledge, up to an extent that Muhammad ibn Abdul Baqi al-Bazzaz said, I did not waste an hour from my life in waste or play. And Abu al-Wafa ibn Aqil, who authored Kitab al-Funun in 800 volumes, said, I did not make it permissible for myself to waste a single hour of my life. And their case reached such that it will not be recited to them, i.e. some of the people before us. Their level reached such that it would be recited to them while they would eat, i.e. they would be eating and someone would recite to them and read a book to them while they're eating. So they don't want to waste that time just eating and passing by without doing anything. In fact, it would be recited to them while they would be in the toilet, i.e. as reported from, I believe it was the grandfather of Ibn Taymiyyah, He will go to the bathroom and someone will be reading. Not that they will be reading in the toilet, but they will be reading far from far, but he could hear them. And then the Sheikh goes on to say, and time, so preserve your time, O student. And Salih ibn Hubayrah advised, saying, and time is the most precious things to be preserved, deserving to be preserved, and it is the easiest of things for you to waste. Allahu Musta'an. I remember in the early days of the internet, I don't know if, no, not the internet, but in the early days, there used to be a website called Kill Some Time. People say that they have free time. Whereas we as Muslims, we don't have something called free time in the sense that we have nothing to do. I'm so bored. There's always something that we have that we could be doing. It doesn't have to always be intensive, and also being balanced. If you have a family, trying to include them in some of the things that you do and making them happy is part of spending your time wisely. That's not a waste of time. But being proportionate in all of that is important as much as possible. And sometimes, perhaps when we hear these statements of those before us that they say, "I've never wasted an hour in my time in my life," or such statements, sometimes some people, the reaction is to become a bit depressed. That, oh wow, they've done this, and look at me, and I'm not doing anything. And sometimes some people's reaction is to say, no, they can't have done that. That must be false. And perhaps the best, or one of the good ways to look at it is, they done that. Okay, let me try do similar, or let me try to, go up to it. Whether they done it or not, whether it's authentic, whether it's true or not, whether it's exaggerated, don't worry about that. That's between them and Allah. But the point is, we should use that as something to motivate us to think, okay, let me get to that level. If you hear that's such and such done something to a great extent, as long as it's not extreme, then you do it, and motivate yourself to get to that level. So it's not something that we just say we give up and say I will never get to that level, because these things happen over time. I don't think it's something that a person does straight away, from 0 to 60. But it's something that happens over time. And even if it means that at the end of your life, in 10 years' time, or in 5 years, or in 20 years' time, you manage to get to that level, then alhamdulillah, that's an achievement. But if we give up now and say I'll never get to that level, then we have already kind of lost. So the aim is to just improve bit by bit. Wherever we reach in the end, then that's up to Allah. But the point is, we want to improve bit by bit. And this is one of the reasons why we read these types of books. Not because we are people that neither the teacher nor perhaps most of the students are people that, now we've read it, halas, we're going to be perfect in manners. No. For me, I know definitely I'm not perfect. But the more I read it, the more it serves as a reminder. And hopefully, the reminder, once it becomes consistent enough, will become nature. And that nature, inshallah ta'ala, will be good habits and practices that will live with us, so that even when we do want to go to a certain path, or we may stray, or we may forget some of these manners, because we have such a repetition of it in our minds, it will be easier for us to return to that path. Okay, let's quickly look at the revision, or let's look at the summaries, inshallah, and then we can be dismissed. Okay. Okay. So today's lesson we started from number 16. So, revering the sittings of knowledge and its tools. Therein the author mentions the high status of knowledge, that they are like the circles of the scholars, they are the circles of the prophets and messengers. And as such, because of that, we should respect such gatherings. And he gave us some of the ways to respect those gatherings. And then he also told us respect the tools of knowledge, primarily the books and what follows from the books. defending knowledge and its carriers. So the author mentions defending the sacredness of knowledge, and then he mentions some of the different manifestations in defending knowledge, such as not learning from a person who is corrupting that knowledge with innovation, or the teacher, for example, rebuking the students. That's a form of defending knowledge, because if knowledge is not being given its right manners, then you're not giving knowledge its proper rights. The author mentioned taking care in asking the scholar or the teacher. We could add there. And he gave us the need for that caution in asking questions, especially questions with regards to knowledge, because they affect both the dunya, such as rules and regulations that people may ask about in different countries, and also they affect the akhirah. And he gave us 4 steps in attaining this caution, which are the 4 steps that the brothers put in the comment section. Think about the question and why you're asking. Number 1, pay attention to what you ask. Number 2, be aware of the sheikh's situation. Number 3, and present the question in the right way. Number 4. Then 19th, the heart's passion for knowledge and its conquering of it. The knowledge is conquering of the heart. If you're a student, this is one of the ways you glorify knowledge. When you have this passion, and it will conquer your heart. It will become what your kind of goal. When you wake up, that's what it is. And when you go to sleep, that's what it is. He said, the author Hafidhullah mentions importance of this passion. What's the importance? That one will not reach heights without knowledge, without having this passion for knowledge. Because knowledge needs patience. Knowledge is hard work over many years, not just a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. No, it's a lifetime worth of work. Then the author goes on. He gave us 3 steps to taste the sweetness of knowledge. And then the pleasure of knowledge is like this. And he gave us some examples of the pleasure of knowledge. And then the last thing that the author mentions is that preserving time in knowledge. And he gave us the importance of preserving time and the example of those before us. And then he mentions how delicate the situation is, the reality of how delicate the situation is. As he mentioned in the last closing points, he said time is one of the things most deserving of being looked after. And at the same time, it's one of those things that is most likely, or it's the easiest for you to squander, for you to get rid of. So, bi'idhnillah, we finish there. Ramadan will take a break, so there's no, as far as for now, like last year, there's not going to be the Sunday classes, but we will do after the first week of Ramadan, then we will set up a schedule for other classes, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And then after Ramadan, we will see, we'll carry on with the lessons, with these lessons, the foundations of knowledge lessons, bi'idhnillah, with Kitab al-Tawheed. But we'll see whether by that time we will be once again in a house from the houses of Allah. Strange to say that, huh? We haven't been in the house from the houses of Allah for long. Allah musta'an. Bi'idhnillah will be there if it's the right time, if Allah decrees. If not, then we'll carry on from home. And what we will do, as one of the brothers mentioned, which is a good idea, for those of you brothers, you will be who want, no one's forced, but for those of you in the WhatsApp groups, then you're going to be on Zoom or something along those lines, so that you can see each other, that no one's sleeping, that no one is relaxing too much in the class, especially with Kitab al-Tawheed, because it's an important book in terms of the ayat and the hadith. We need to try to understand it properly. So if we're not face to face by then what we will do is try to have the live stream on one place, and also not in the same place as the live stream. So then inshallah it will be a bit more clear. I can see from your faces if you're understanding the ayat and hadith that we mentioned, how they prove certain points and so forth, because it's very important to be able to make that connection between how the ayah or the hadith proves the point that is being made for each chapter and so forth. So with that, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those people that truly glorify knowledge, and make us of those people that knowledge protects them. Because knowledge is something that protects the person who truly acquires it, such that when he or she wants to do something bad, he remembers a certain ayat or a certain hadith, or he has a certain knowledge and awareness of Allah that stops him or her from doing that. And it makes us of those people that knowledge causes us to return back to Allah whenever we may sin or stray, that the knowledge that we are aiming to strive for will be a cause for us to return back by making tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before it's too late. And we ask Allah to make us of those people that are inheritors of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and those people who know him the best, as he mentioned that rarely those who truly fear Allah are those who are aware of him, who have ilm, al-ulama, and that he makes us of those people who are imams in the dunya, imams through the knowledge that we have, and that we are mubarak, that we are blessed, i.e. we bring great goodness to the people around us, to wherever we may be, and that's through the knowledge that we possess. That we ask Allah, He makes us of those people that the inhabitants of the heavens and the earth and even the fish in the sea, they seek forgiveness for, and that He makes for us the path to Jannah easy because of the path that we strive to take by His permission in the dunya towards knowledge, and that He makes us of those people that are striving hard in order to understand His faith and the guidance that He has sent down, so that we may spread the word of Allah and make it the Most High. With that, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we finished, and may Allah grant us the ability to reach the end of Ramadan and to make it a productive Ramadan, and make sure you keep in touch with each other. I'll see you after. Subhan, any questions, then you can send it by WhatsApp or email it. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك